everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Jason Nadek. There's a famous quote by Benjamin Franklin that goes something like this: by failing to plan, you're planning to fail. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that when it comes to investing. Following an investment plan can help investors stay on track with their financial goals and hopefully help them retire with the lifestyle they want in their golden years. Of course, many Canadians don't end up creating an investment plan at all, while others might make costly mistakes along the way that can hold back the growth of their portfolio. So, we're going to cover some considerations that can help an investment plan reach its full potential. Joining us is Rob Brown. He's the author of Wealthing Like Rabbits. His book offers an introduction to personal finance best practices, explained with some help from a few silly anecdotes and some pop culture references along the way. Rob, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to our talk today.
As am I. Well, if I've got a quick question for you here before we begin, and I'm sure a number of our audience are intrigued, like myself here. How did you come up with the name of your book, Wealthing Like Rabbits?
Well, I get that question a lot. So, Wealthing Like Rabbits stems from two ideas inside the book that I sort of mashed together for the title, and I'll explain what I'm talking about. Inside the book, I talk a little bit about the word saving, and I suggest that sometimes we use the word saving improperly, or that it's not necessarily the best word in some situations. And I'll give you an example, Jason. If someone were to go to a big box store and buy a new big screen TV, and that television regularly costs $1,500, but this person gets it on sale for $1,000, they would say they saved $500, where I would suggest they haven't saved anything. They've still spent $1,000 on a TV. Maybe they've spent $500 less than they would have otherwise, but they've still spent money. They haven't saved anything. So I suggest in the book that we should come up with a new word that explains saving that actually contributes to your overall net wealth by putting some money into an RSP, putting some money into a TFSA, or even paying down debt. Any saving that you do that actually increases your net wealth should be called wealthing. And then the second part, the rabbit part, is in a section of the book where I'm talking about compound interest and how much numbers can grow upon themselves given enough time. And I tell the story, a true story, of what happened in Australia when in 1859 a farmer by the name of Thomas Austin decided he wanted to go rabbit hunting, and there were no rabbits in Australia in 1859. Rabbits are not indigenous to the Australian continent. So Tom got 24 rabbits. Legend has it was 24 rabbits. He had shipped from England, dumped them onto his farm, and 60 years later, there was close to 10 billion rabbits in Australia. So just a fun anecdotal way to show how powerful compound interest can be given enough time. So I took those ideas, the wealthing and the rabbits, and kind of mashed it together to sound a little bit like that other ing thing that rabbits do to get people's attention.
Definitely gives us some different perspective to view the book from. Absolutely great. Thank you for that. Now, before we get into our conversation, I actually have a trivia question for our audience all around compound interest. So the rabbit theme kind of plays through here. Now, how many years would it take for $10,000 to grow into $100,000 if it grew by an average of 5% annually? Now, stay tuned until the end of our conversation when we'll reveal the answer. All right, let's get into our discussion. What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions many people have when it comes to building wealth?
Great question. And I think that one of the biggest misconceptions about investing is that it has to be complicated by nature. People turn on their television sets and they see the Business News Network or Business News talking about things like stock buybacks and derivatives or cryptocurrency for the last couple of years. And those subjects and how to invest can be intimidating for some people and for good reason. But I also think it's important for people to understand that investing is not usually about those sort of speculative things. Investing should be about building wealth slowly over the long term. I think another misconception about investing is that before you start, you have to have or you have to earn a lot of money. But in my experience, how someone manages the money they have, their cash flow, is often far more important in being able to begin to invest than how much money they actually start with. After all, the purpose of investing is to build your money, not to start with money.
Right. So it's not about having large amounts of money to start with. It's the element of saving, and doing small incremental
Sure,
amounts can be impactful
absolutely.
over long term. Absolutely. All right. So why do you think many people often neglect to build and follow an investment plan, even though it's something that we hear quite a lot about its importance of doing?
Yeah, I get that. People are busy. They've got a lot of things going on in their lives. They're working, they're picking up the kids from school, taking them to hockey games, dance lessons, whatever they got going on. And I think it's human nature to prioritize what's right in front of us. And sometimes it's easy to postpone something that can be easily postponed. An oft used example, but it's a good example, is investing is kind of like getting to go to the gym to get some exercise. We all know that exercise is important, but far too often, too many people push it aside for some other things. But here's the thing, with an exercise plan, even after you've started, you still have to go to the gym 3 times a week or whatever to keep it going. But with an investment plan, once you set up and take those first steps for an automated investment plan, it's automatic. You don't have to do anything. Just check in on it once or twice a year.
It's that smarter, not harder type of approach in investing that can be quite helpful. Okay, so let's get into your specific do's and don'ts that you believe that can help an investment plan soar. Your first do is to begin investing for retirement as early as possible, even if it's a small amount, like you just mentioned. Why is that so impactful?
Two reasons. First is, and I alluded to this earlier, the incredible power of compound interest. And Jason, I always feel ridiculous whenever I say that line. It sounds like it's something out of a cartoon. But compound interest really is one of those things that sounds too good to be true, but when you dig into it, really is that good. Take a look at the first example on the screen. By contributing just $100 a week, every week for 40 weeks, you would contribute just over $200,000. But this person ends up with $644,000. That difference of 444 grand is all interest. And if somebody contributed just a little more each week or was able to get an even slightly better rate of return, that number would be much higher yet. Compound interest is money building on money, year after year after year, and it can produce some pretty amazing results. If you look at a compound interest graph, you contribute the first year, you contribute the third year, you contribute the fourth year. The compound interest kind of starts slow in the beginning, but really ramps up big time at the end. So if someone delays starting their savings plan by, let's say, 5 years, it's not that they'll miss out on those savings they're going to get in those 5 years. They just get it later. But they do potentially miss out on the back end of the savings, and that's where the really big money is. Or they're going to end up working until they're in their mid 70s or whatever. Starting early gives you a chance to save longer, and that's where the really big money is. The second reason that it's important to start early is that all habits are forming, and it's generally easier to form a habit when you're young. That doesn't mean it can't be done later. It certainly can be, but it's harder, and the math definitely favors starting early.
So, for those in our audience interested in hearing about some savvy ways to save money, check out our webinar, 5 Ways to Supercharge Your Savings During High Inflation, with our guest speaker, Gordon Stein. You can find it in our Learning Center, on Webroker, as well as on TD's YouTube page. Now, many people might want to save and invest while they're also carrying debts. How might they want to approach repaying debt and investing?
I always think it's a good idea to try and pay off any high interest debt. And for the sake of this, we'll say any double digit interest rate debt like credit cards or payday loans before beginning to save or invest. The interest payments that you're making on servicing these high interest debts is eating away at your cash flow anyways, and might make it hard to free up the money you need to invest. And it's also important to note that paying off debt is itself an investment. If you pay off a credit card debt at 21% interest, that's a 21% rate of return that year, which is amazing. And there's absolutely no product out there that's going to give you a guaranteed rate of return of
Mhm.
21%. So that's money very well spent. And again, freeing up that debt should free up some money in your cash flow to allow you to invest. Now, if you've got something like a mortgage or a lower interest loan that you're paying off a car payment, you probably don't want to wait until your mortgage is paid off before starting to invest. There, you'll have to find the right balance between paying off your mortgage and your other loans as quickly as possible, but still freeing up some money to invest.
So it sounds like having almost like a debt repayment plan as well. So not sticking your head in the sand, but being aware of what you've borrowed so you can make targeted repayments
Absolutely.
that are going to benefit you the most. Okay. So we sometimes have wasteful spending habits that can make saving and investing more difficult. So your first don't bother keeping up with the Joneses and falling prey to what's called lifestyle creep. Why is this so important?
Yeah, this is a big one for me. And here's a fun fact that our listeners might not know. That phrase, keeping up with the Joneses, actually stems from a comic strip that ran in American newspapers. I think it was from 1917 to 1935. And this comic strip, Keeping Up with the Joneses, poked fun at a fictitious couple named Mr. and Mrs. McGinnis. And Mr. and Mrs. McGinnis were always putting on airs and buying things they didn't need to keep up with their wealthy neighbors, the Joneses. Everybody here listening today knows someone that's buying stuff they don't need, often on credit, so with money they don't even have yet, often to impress other people, sometimes people they don't even really like. I think it's important for people to make sound decisions that are right for them without worrying about how it looks to anybody else. And this is one area where I really try to put my money, literally, where my mouth is. My car in my driveway right now is a 2010 Honda with over 275,000 K on it. And I have a lot of people saying to me, Rob, why don't you get a new car? To which I reply, why would I? This car works just fine. I don't make any car payments. It's good on gas. It's easy to maintain. It doesn't hurt my cash flow and it gets me from point A to point B quite safely. So I really think people need to be comfortable making decisions that are right for them and not buy into that whole keep up with the Joneses idea. When we talk about lifestyle creep, that's when let's say you get a new job or you get a raise at work. So you have more money coming in, but instead of taking advantage of that extra income to save or to invest for your future, you go increase your lifestyle, increase your spending, and pick up some new clothes or a new car or a bigger house, going out more. And I'm not saying that people don't deserve a little bit of creep to, get out there and buy themselves some nice things. But again, it's that whole balanced perspective, take some money and buy yourself something nice and also increase your savings or your investment or your RSP contributions as well.
And one thing that can help avoid lifestyle creep is your next do. That's create an expense tracker to monitor your spending. How can this help in more ways than you might expect?
Yeah, I'm going to try to get through this part without talking about the B word, budgets. But that said, there are very few things in personal finance that are as eye opening for a lot of people than clearly understanding where their money is going on a monthly or quarterly basis. Very few of us are really truly aware of where all our money is going. So to fix that, we need to track it. Now, if you're, a big nerd like
Mhm.
me, you can track every expense on an Excel spreadsheet and categorize it out, blah, 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 blah. But it also can be as simply as carefully reviewing your credit card and your banking statements each month. And as you go through each line of your statement, ask yourself questions like this. Did I really need to buy this? Or as I sit here today going through my statement, would I rather have the $76.34 that I spent at a restaurant last month? Would I rather be able to keep that money in my pocket, which hopefully could go toward investing or saving or wealthing? Scientists often talk about a phenomenon known as the observer effect. And the observer effect is where the act of measuring something changes whatever it is that is being measured. So when someone starts a spending tracker, chances are they will improve their spending habits just through the act of tracking it, just like a dieter finds themselves eating better as soon as they start monitoring their calorie intake.
And one of the things I like about what you said, and I can almost equate it to an investing plan as well, is that when you've created a budget, it can help you take the emotion out of the kind of analyzing the spending. You kind of remove some of that impulsiveness of the
Absolutely.
moment. So it can be very helpful. Okay, Rob, your next don't is don't overpay for financial products when a cheaper alternative exists that meets their needs. What sort of impacts can fees make over time?
A huge impact. A lot of investment products have fees of 2 to 3 and upward percent, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it really is. Investors pay those fees every year, whether their investments go up or down. So if you had an investment that went down 7%, you'd actually be paying 10 if it had a 3% fee. And in an investment environment where a 6% return's not bad, a 3% fee could eat up half of your gains. Over years, this can add up to tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. And there's no guarantee at all that those expensive products will outperform a lower cost product over time. In fact, I believe the history suggests they won't. It's hard to overstate how important this is.
Okay, let's get back to the do column. Another do is to prioritize contributions to an RSP over a TFSA in many cases, but especially for low income earners. Now, I know there's a lot of debate on this particular topic. Can you explain to us why you feel this way?
Sure. And you're right. There is a lot of debate over this, and I tend to be a bit of a contrarian here. Um, let's start with this. There's really no clear, defined answer. People need to do first what's best for their personal situation and maybe talk to an accountant first. There's no bad answer for the question. They're both great products. That debate gets to be a little bit like, what's the best cardio equipment? What's the best workout at your gym for cardio? An exercise bike or an elliptical? They're both great, but the question is, which is right for you? All that said, I do tend to favor RSPs over TFSAs. And in order to explain why, I'll have to give you a quick overview of both products. Your RSP allows an investor to contribute up to 18% of their income each year to a maximum amount that changes every year. And in 2022, I think it's 29,000 and something. The money that you contribute to an RSP is not taxed the year it goes in. So again, if someone earned $100,000 in a year and they contributed $20,000 to their RSP, they would only be paying income tax on 80 grand that year. But it's important to realize they do have to pay tax when they take the money out. Hopefully when they're retired in their late 50s, 60s. So I think that RSPs should be called registered retirement tax deferred accounts. You have to pay tax on them, you just don't pay it till later. TFSAs are a little bit different. When you contribute money to a TFSA, you don't get the same tax break you do with the RSP for the contribution. So if that same person earned $100,000 in a year and they contributed $20,000 to their TFSA, they still have to pay tax on the full $100,000. Money put into a TFSA has already been taxed. But when you take the money out of a TFSA, you don't have to pay any tax because you paid tax on that money before it went in. Tax-free savings accounts are a terribly named product because they're not tax-free. You just pay the money before it goes in. What they should be called is prepaid tax savings account. That's going to be my next job, naming savings accounts for the government. So in my opinion, part of the decision about whether to contribute to an RSP or a TFSA has to do with when do you want the tax break? Now with an RRSP or later with a TFSA? And this is why I tend to lean toward an RRSP for most people. You get the tax break earlier, when you're younger, when you most likely need it more. When you're in your 20s and 30s, it's hard enough to save money. New careers, maybe a couple of kids, trying to save for a house, maybe you bought a house and all the expenses that come with it, trying to save for retirement. It's really tough. So I say take the tax break now, knowing you will have to pay taxes later in life in retirement when hopefully you won't need it as much. The kids have left the nest, your house is paid for, etc., etc., etc. Plus, in retirement, you might actually be in a lower tax bracket than you were when you were working, so you could end up paying less tax overall. Every situation is different, but big picture, I think more people need the tax savings break when they're younger than they do in retirement. Plus, the other reason I prefer RSPs is when you take money out of your RSP, it is automatically taxed at source. They'll withhold some tax when you take it out, sometimes up to 30%. So another reason I prefer RSPs is I'm hoping those taxes they take out at source will discourage people from withdrawing their money before retirement early. Where with the TFSA, it's real easy to get at that money tax-free.
And some of those penalties to withdraw money from an RRSP can be as high as 30%. So that can be quite a deterrent. Okay, for those in our audience interested in learning about the ins and outs of registered accounts like RRSPs and TFSAs, check out our video course in our Learning Center, Account Types, Registered Plans. Your next don't over-contribute money from your paycheck towards paying your taxes. Many of us like receiving a hefty tax refund check at the end of the fiscal year. How might this hold back your investment plan?
Don't overpay your taxes. I know it's really good it feels good when you get a check from the government at the end of the year, you get your tax refund check. But I think it's important to remember it's a refund, which means you overpaid your taxes for the last year, which also means what you've done is you've essentially given the government an interest-free loan on your money. They're not going to pay you any interest for that. You just gave it to them. And aren't you a nice person for doing that? What I would prefer to do is pay less taxes each week, which would free up some money in my cash flow, which would allow me to contribute more money to an RSP throughout the year, which would mean overall I would pay less tax at the end of the year.
Especially in today's inflation kind of focused economy, I think we'd all love to take an interest-free loan. Even the government would probably sign up for that. And to follow up on that, there is a way to lower your taxes that come out of your paycheck if you regularly contribute to an RRSP. How might that work?
Many investors don't know this, but you're able to apply to Revenue Canada to have your taxes reduced on your paycheck if you meet certain criteria. And one of those criteria is making regular RSP contributions. So when you will get a new job, you end up on the first day or online, you have to fill out a form called the TD1. And based on what you put on your TD1 tells your payroll department how much tax to take out of your paycheck. There is another form you can obtain, a T1213 from the CRA website. And if you fill it out and submit it to your local taxation office with proof of regular RSP contributions, they will send you a letter that you can provide to your employer, allowing them to reduce the number of taxes that are deducted from your paycheck each week. But it is important that you make those RSP contributions to make sure you're not taxed again at the end of the year.
Another don't of yours isn't a hard and fast rule per se, but something to be very careful about when considering, and that's borrowing money to contribute to your RRSP. What are the potential risks here?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's necessarily a potential risk, but I'm not, in big picture, broad perspective, a fan of borrowing to make RSP contributions. And if you borrow money to maximize your RSP, let's say in January for the year, over the next year or two or whatever period of time, you're now going to be making payments on a loan and paying interest on that loan. So you will be paying more money to contribute to your RSP than you would have paid if you had simply made regular payments throughout the year and never borrowed the money. And you're a little behind the curve now because you're making payments on a loan with interest on it, which is going to stop you or at least hinder you from making payments throughout the year. So I'm a big fan of getting ahead of that curve a little bit, making regular RSP payments throughout the year so you're not in a position to need to borrow money in order to max out, which means you won't be making loan payments the next year. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is we get a save on the interest by setting up a regular monthly contribution plan. We also get a bit of a jump on the compounding effect you've been speaking so highly of as well.
Yeah, and you know there are exceptions to every rule. If January comes along and you haven't maxed out your RSP, and you have reason to believe that in, let's say, May, you're coming into a lump sum of money, and inheritance is probably a good but bad example, then absolutely borrow the money for your RSP. When you get that money in May, pay off the loan and go from there. But as a general rule, I'm not a fan of borrowing when there was another option that wouldn't cost as much available.
Yep. It's another nice example of examining the situation based on your own merits. Similarly, some investors might like to use the first-time home buyers plan to borrow money from their RRSP to help with the down payment for their home. Why do you think this is generally an unwise decision?
Okay, and again, there are exceptions to every rule, but as a general rule, I don't like borrowing from your RSP for anything, let alone the first time home buyers plan. And it's important to keep some perspective on why you're saving in your RSP. It's for later in life so that you will someday be able to retire into some sort of sunset and not have to worry about money. And every time you take money out of that, you are to some degree damaging your plan to do that. And the first time home buyers plan is misunderstood. It's not tax-free money. All you're doing is borrowing money for yourself, but you have to pay back that money to the RSP with after-tax money, so that money will be taxed. Or if you don't pay it back within the 12 years, you will be taxed on the withdrawal you had. So either way, that money is taxed. I'd much rather see people use their RSPs to save for retirement, which is what it's for. And tax-free savings accounts are an excellent place to save some money for a down payment on a house. Again, it's not that defined black and white. People need to look at what's right for their situation. But as a general rule, I think that's a solid strategy.
Okay, Rob, we're going to have to leave our conversation there. Thank you for sharing so many fantastic factors to consider when growing an investment plan. I'm sure you've given our viewers plenty to think about in their own portfolios. Now, before we say goodbye, let's reveal the answer to our trivia question. As a refresher, the question was, how many years would it take $10,000 to grow into $100,000 if it grew by an average of 5% annually? And the answer is, it would take just shy of 48 years for $10,000 to grow into $100,000 if it earned an average return of 5% annually. However, it would take just 27 years if the investor contributed an additional $100 per month during that same time period. That's the power of compound interest. Now, Rob, it's been a very interesting discussion. Do you have any closing thoughts?
The only thing that I would close with is for the listeners out there that really haven't spent any time seeing how powerful compound interest can be. I would encourage those people to find a compound interest calculator. There's thousands of them available online, and really take some time and see, if I put $100 a week away at an average rate of 6%, 7% for 35 years, and just see how much money they could potentially end up with. I think that's a very powerful way of encouraging people to start to invest and to staying on that investment plan.
Some additional great advice. Thanks again for joining us, Rob. And for those in our audience, make sure to register for our upcoming live webinars and check out our library of on-demand content available in the Learning Center and on our YouTube page. We'll see you all next time.